My sister-in-law secretly rented out our family cabin on Airbnb and pocketed the money. Now she's banned, and the family is divided forever. So my grandparents own a cabin near a ski resort about in 112 hours from where we live. It was used a lot when I was a kid by most of my family, but there was a couple-year gap when all of my generation moved away for school that it sat empty. In the last few years, more of us have moved back and started using the cabin. It was easy to share as only 5 of us use it. And we are all considerate that it's a family-owned place, so we message each other about availability and what essentials, like cleaning supplies, need to be replaced. This changed with my brother, his wife, and 3 kids. My sister-in-law always claimed to hate the place because it's not for entertainment, it's mostly a place for a few people to crash on a ski trip. So last year, she put her kids on the ski team and went around the rest of the cousins to my grandparents, directly saying she wants to use it more often. GPs were okay with this, telling them that as long as it's not reserved by others, they can use it. She proceeded to reserve every weekend that winter, not even using half of them. When I asked about getting a weekend, she was really weird about it over the phone, so I visited her to find a free weekend. When I asked her about having every weekend booked, she said, "We don't want it every weekend. We just want the ability to go every week, and we don't want to decide until that Friday." She said that with a straight face, expecting it to be normal. Well, I reached out to the other cousins that use it and found out everyone had gotten a similar response from her. Most had just moved back to town and assumed that was normal cause she's the only one with kids. We went to my grandparents as a group and explained the situation. They changed the policy. Now each of us gets an even amount of weekends that we can swap with each other if we wanted. This pissed off my sister-in-law. She's been frantically calling all of us trying to get our weekends, saying stuff like she already invited friends for specific weekends or her kids need to be there on certain dates. When that failed, she started texting all of us demanding we not go our weekends. Well, we got all the texts together and went to the grandparents. Now sister-in-law can only use the place if she gets confirmation that none of us will be there, so basically never. She's still freaking out, but it has gotten my cousins and I closer as we've all agreed to be adults about it and just talk to each other when a conflict arises. Update 1. After my last post, you'd think the situation with my sister-in-law, SIL, would settle down, right? I mean, she lost the privilege of hogging the family cabin every weekend, and we all thought that was that. But no, this woman just doesn't know how to let things go. The thing about my SIL is that she can't stand not getting her way. And when she's told no, she finds a way to spin things so that she's the victim in every situation. It's exhausting. So I thought I'd update you all because things definitely took a weird and frustrating turn. After my grandparents put the new rules in place about the cabin, I thought things would smooth out. Like I mentioned before, we all get an equal amount of weekends now. And if one of us can't make it on our designated weekend, we can swap with someone else. This made sense to everyone except SEL, of course. She started calling me and the other cousins, and at first it was just the same old whining about how she needed specific weekends because of her kids' ski team, or how she already had plans with friends and didn't want to cancel. But here's the thing. Nobody cares about her last-minute plans. We're a family. We all work around each other, and she's just acting like she owns the place. It got worse after we went to my grandparents with the text messages. She must have realized her power grab had been taken away because she became increasingly passive-aggressive. For example, she stopped inviting us to her kids' birthdays and family events, which was honestly a relief because, let's be real, no one really enjoyed those awkward parties anyway. But then, she took things up a notch. SIL started spreading rumors within the family, telling everyone who would listen that we were ganging up on her and trying to take away something special from her kids. This led to some uncomfortable phone calls from distant relatives who didn't know the full story. I had to explain the whole situation, which was just exhausting. Then came the weirdest part. She started trying to manipulate our grandparents. Keep in mind, my grandparents are very old school, but they're not easily fooled. SIL must have thought she could play the poor mom card and get them to change the rules again. She started dropping by their house unannounced, bringing the kids with her and making sure they were always decked out in their ski gear. She'd give my grandparents this whole sob story about how the kids were so excited to use the cabin but were heartbroken that they might not be able to because of these new rules. I mean, it's obvious what she's doing. She's trying to guilt trip them into thinking her kids are somehow missing out on their entire childhood because she can't monopolize the cabin anymore. It's ridiculous. But the best part? My grandparents weren't buying it. They're way sharper than she gives them credit for. My grandma called me one afternoon and was like, "She's trying to make us feel bad about the kids, but we know what's going on. We're not changing the rules." Bless my grandma for being such a legend. I know SIL's little guilt trips weren't working, but that didn't stop her from trying. Then, out of nowhere, SIL came up with this new tactic. She decided to try the "we should all go together" route. One Saturday morning, I get a text from her, and I'm sure she sent it to the other cousins too. It was this long-winded message about how we should all just start planning family weekends where we all go up to the cabin together, like one big happy family. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why not? It's a family cabin, right? But trust me, this is just another one of her manipulation tactics. Her version of family weekends really means I'll still take control of everything, but I'll pretend it's inclusive so no one can complain. She'd love to be the one planning every weekend, deciding who can come and what we do, and then acting like she's doing us all a favor. When no one immediately jumped on board with her family weekend plan, she started getting pushy. A few days later, she called me and tried to sell the idea like it was this amazing opportunity for family bonding. I told her I'd think about it, which really just meant I needed some time to figure out how to say hell no without causing World War III. She pulled the same thing with the other cousins, and we all knew what was up. We texted each other on the side and agreed that the idea sounded like a nightmare. Nobody wanted to spend an entire weekend being controlled by SL, who would no doubt micromanage everything, down to what snacks we could bring. So, we collectively decided to ignore the suggestion. Here's where it gets even crazier. After the family weekends idea flopped, SIL started showing up at the cabin unannounced. And I'm not talking about on her weekends. She'd just roll up with the kids and act like she had every right to be there, even if one of us had already reserved the place. One weekend, one of my cousins, Sarah, had booked the cabin for a girls' trip with some of her friends. They had all driven up, ready for a chill weekend, only to find SEL and her kids already there, claiming she had forgotten it wasn't her weekend. Can you imagine? Sarah, being the nice person she is, didn't kick them out, but she was furious. They ended up awkwardly sharing the space, but it ruined the vibe for the whole weekend. After that, we had a big family meeting where we had to lay down some ground rules. It was getting out of hand. SIL wasn't just being difficult anymore. She was completely disregarding the rules and acting like she was above everyone else. We all agreed that if anyone shows up unannounced on someone else's weekend, they'd have to leave. No exceptions. It wasn't a fun conversation, but it needed to happen. The funny thing is, SIL tried to play the victim again, acting like we were being unreasonable for not wanting her to show up whenever she felt like it. But at this point, nobody was buying her crap. The cousins and I are all on the same page, and even my grandparents are backing us up. It's wild to me that SIL thought she could just steamroll everyone and get away with it. But I guess when you've always gotten your way, you think you can keep doing it forever. So that's where things stand right now. SIL is still sulking, and we're all just trying to enjoy our weekends at the cabin without any more drama. I honestly don't know what her next move will be, but if I've learned anything from this, it's that she doesn't give up easily. Hopefully, she'll just move on and find something else to obsess over. But knowing her, I'm not holding my breath. Update 2. All right, folks, I didn't think I'd be back with another update this soon, but things took a wild turn after my last post. So buckle up because this whole cabin situation went from annoying to outright chaotic in a way none of us saw coming. After the whole debacle with my sister-in-law, SIL, trying to weasel her way back into controlling the cabin situation, things were quiet for a few weeks. We thought maybe, just maybe, she had finally given up after we laid down the law about no one showing up unannounced. We were wrong. And when I say wrong, I mean really wrong. The first sign that she wasn't done with her games was when she went completely radio silent. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat. Nothing. It felt a little too good to be true, and as it turns out, it was. About a month after the family weekend idea flopped, and after we all agreed no more drop ins, my cousin Sarah got a phone call from a neighbor who lives near the cabin. Apparently, there had been some strange activity up there. Now, keep in mind, the cabin is pretty remote, and the closest neighbor is still a few hundred yards away, but they know the family and keep an eye on things. This neighbor mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars parked there for the last 2 weekends, which was strange because none of us had reserved the cabin during that time. Sarah, being the detective she is, decided to drive up there and check it out. When she arrived, what she found was, well, let's just say it was next level crazy. SEL had decided to start renting out the cabin on Airbnb behind everyone's back. Yep, you read that right. She had secretly listed the family cabin without asking anyone and was making money off it. Sarah found a group of total strangers at the cabin when she got there, and they were just as confused as she was. They said they had rented the place online and had no idea it was a family-owned cabin, let alone that SIL had no right to rent it out. Sarah immediately called me, and we all got on the phone together to figure out what the hell was going on. It turns out SIL had listed the cabin on Airbnb a couple of weeks ago, using some fake name and pretending to be the owner. She had listed it at a ridiculously low price, which explained why it had been rented out so quickly. We were absolutely livid. I mean, this wasn't just a little overstepping. This was fraud. Plain and simple. She had no right to do any of this, and she knew it. The craziest part? She didn't think she'd get caught. She must have assumed that because the cabin wasn't being used every single weekend, she could make some quick cash on the side without anyone noticing. And to make it even worse, the renters had trashed the place. I'm talking beer cans everywhere, cigarette burns on the furniture, and some seriously questionable stains on the carpet. The cabin looked like it had been the site of a frat party, not a peaceful ski retreat. After we confronted her, SEL tried to play dumb at first. She acted all innocent, like she didn't know it was a big deal, and said she thought she was helping by making sure the cabin was getting used. Of course, we weren't buying it. When we pushed harder, she finally admitted that money was tight, and she thought renting out the cabin would be a good way to bring in some extra income. She claimed she had planned to split the money with us, but honestly, that was just a lie to try and save face. If that was true, why hadn't she mentioned it before? Why use a fake name? None of it added up. We knew we couldn't just let this slide, so we had another family meeting, this time with my grandparents, and laid everything out. At this point, even they couldn't defend her actions anymore. SEL had crossed a line, and it wasn't just about being selfish with the cabin. She had involved complete strangers in our private family space, damaged the property, and tried to make money off something that didn't belong to her. My grandparents were furious, and for them, this was the final straw. The fallout from this was pretty intense. My brother, SIL's husband, had no idea what was going on. When he found out, he was mortified. He called each of us to apologize on her behalf and even offered to pay for the damages out of his own pocket. He's not a bad guy, honestly, but it's clear that SIL runs the show in their marriage and he's always cleaning up her messes. But here's the thing. This time, it wasn't something he could just smooth over with an apology. The family decided that SIL is no longer allowed to use the cabin. At all. Ever. Not even on the weekends assigned to her family. My brother can still come with the kids, but only if he's flying solo. SEL is completely banned, and that's not something that will be changing anytime soon. She tried to argue at first, saying it wasn't fair and that we were overreacting, but nobody was listening to her anymore. Even her own husband was on our side, which must have been a blow to her ego because she always assumed he'd back her no matter what. To make matters even worse for her, we found out through some digging that she had already booked more weekends on Airbnb before we even caught her. She had renters lined up for the next couple of months. Obviously, we canceled all of those bookings and took down the listing, but it was a mess trying to sort everything out. Some of the people who had already booked were pretty pissed off, and a few even threatened to leave bad reviews on Airbnb. We explained the situation to the platform, and they were surprisingly understanding, but it was still a headache. In the end, SIL's greed and selfishness blew up in her face. She's now the black sheep of the family, and honestly, nobody wants to deal with her anymore. Even her kids are starting to notice the tension, and I feel bad for them because they're innocent in all of this. My brother, bless him, is trying to hold things together, but you can tell he's embarrassed and frustrated with her. As for the cabin, we've made some new rules to prevent anything like this from happening again. We've installed security cameras around the property, and we're using a shared calendar app now where everyone has to log in and book their weekends officially. No more first come, first served nonsense, and definitely no more sneaky Airbnb rentals. We've also decided that if anyone tries to break the rules like SIL did, they're out for good. No second chances. So that's where things stand now. The cabin is back to being a peaceful place for the family, and the cousins and I are more united than ever. If there's one good thing that came out of this, it's that we've all grown closer, and we're more protective of our family traditions than ever before. Seal's antics might have caused a lot of drama, but in the end, she only succeeded in isolating herself. Let this be a lesson to anyone dealing with a manipulative family member. Sometimes you just have to draw the line and stick to it.